Hi, my name is Dr. Fox, licensed psychologist in the state of Texas and the expert in the area of personality disorders. And in this video, we're going to talk about the BPD do's and BPD don'ts. And what this is a list that I created in working with my clients over the years of things to focus on, things that individuals with BPD just kind of need to remind themselves of as they go along. Are these going to be earth-shattering to you? Maybe, maybe not. But these are just things to consider, things to take with you, and things that I hope are really helpful. So let's get started. So first thing is just kind of the layout. So we're going to do a do, and then we're going to do a don't. And then we're going to go back to a do, and then back to a don't. So we're going to go back and forth, a little mix-up, okay? So let's start first. Let's start with those BPD do's. And the first one is you want to make sleep a priority. Do make sleep a priority. You need a sleep routine because sleep is critical. And there's been actually a lot of research that has shown this in individuals with BPD, that when they are sleep deprived, it is much more difficult for them to control their urges. They tend to fall into those old maladaptive patterns easier. The emotional control that is often needed for individuals who have BPD tends to be harder to contain, to manage. And it is often more difficult for individuals with BPD to implement new and adaptive strategies because of that level of sleep deprivation, because they're more fatigued. It's harder to utilize what's called self-monitoring. It's harder to use that because you're so exhausted, because you're so tired. And it wears you away, wears your strengths and abilities away. So that first do is, right, do make sleep a priority. And it's important to have a sleep routine, and that sleep is critical. Okay, so in that routine, what you want to do is you want to try to go to bed every night as best you can around the same time. Have a ritual, right? A lot of folks, what they do is, first they may brush their teeth or brush their hair or do some daily hygiene is really good before you go to bed, and then go to sleep. Try to avoid watching TV, playing on your iPad or your tablet. Try to avoid those things, because what the tablets do is that their light particularly is designed to keep you awake, to keep you attended to the screen, and that's not what we want before we go to bed. So you want to make sure that you're slowing down. Reading a book is good. Reading a workbook is good. No, just throwing that in there. Reading something can be good as well, but trying to stay away from some of those screens and allow yourself to fall asleep. Okay? And that's our first one. That's our first do. Now let's go to our first don't. Now the first don't is don't give in to those old, reflexive, maladaptive habits. And what that is that when you feel that activation, something happens. Maybe it's a thought, a feeling, a belief. Maybe it's from interactions with a particular person. And when you experience that activation, you immediately goes into those old habits. And these are those maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that you fall into. So let's say that you felt rejected in a circumstance or by someone that is important to you. So that rejection kicks off core content of abandonment. And if you're not sure what core content is, I have a lot of videos that discuss it. You can check those out. But it activates that core content, right? That sense of something inside you, that fear of abandonment, that can also sometimes kick off that sense of emptiness. And then what happens is then it ignites or follows through with an activation of surface structure behaviors, which are those maladaptive beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that actually support your BPD. So what happens is that you experience or you perceive rejection activates core content of abandonment, also emptiness. Then those maladaptive BPD, beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. Belief is sometimes that you're worthless, less than. Behaviors could be sometimes self-harm, could be sometimes isolation, could sometimes be aggression, okay? And then the pattern is, what do you do? How does it play out? Is it that you first attack the person you feel rejected from? Is it that you go inward and you attack yourself? What is that belief, behaviors, and patterns? So the first don't is that we don't want to give in to those old, reflexive, maladaptive patterns, and instead we want to utilize adaptive strategies, beneficial, adaptive, and healthy strategies. What can you do? Well, there's other do's and don'ts, right, that we're going to go through that can help you utilize. I also have a workbook that has a lot of adaptive strategies in it, also helps you explore those issues. It's really important to build insight. That's really important for a lot of folks with BPD. So that's our first don't. Let's go to our second do. Our second do is do practice pause all the time. And by practicing pause, what that is that very similar to what our first don't is that sense of activation. What you want to do is you want to press pause before you engage in behavior, before you get enveloped by those thoughts, those overwhelming BPD thoughts, is that you want to pause. Whoa, just slow down a minute. Press pause. Now, your BPD is going to tell you that this is an emergency. It has to be dealt with right away. Oh my God, 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 right? But the reality is that 99% of our life is not an emergency. And only 1%. And those 1% are exceptionally rare. Obviously, it's about 1% of our life, right? But we misinterpret. Individuals with BPD are at a higher probability of misinterpreting the environment. They're misinterpreting signals. They're misinterpreting feelings, thoughts, behaviors of themselves as well as others. So what we want to do is we want to press pause, slow down, and don't act. Just stop. Don't fall into your thoughts, right? Don't fall into those things. Stay present, right? So when we press pause, we're going to think about, okay, where am I and what am I doing? That's it. Get really centered. Be mindful of where you are. Then, while you've pressed pause, reevaluate what's going on and that activating event or instance. And it's using that reevaluation that can help you have greater control over it. And that's what we want to do. That's how we control BPD and its beliefs, behaviors, and patterns that are associated with it. So that second do is do practice pause all the time. Don't do it selectively, nothing like that. Folks with BPD need to practice pause all the time. Slow down. Now, number two don't is don't abuse substances, alcohol and drugs. Regretfully, there's a high comorbidity between substance abuse, which includes alcohol and drugs, obviously, right, and BPD. And a lot of times that's because it is a maladaptive coping strategy that sort of overlays or kind of wipes out a lot of those BPD components. And that's really problematic because what happens is that obviously addiction can ensue, which is much more complicated with a BPD, with a personality disorder, borderline personality disorder in particular, and it complicates the treatment process. It slows the treatment process. In many cases, it will stall it or completely throw it off track in other instances as well. So you want to really monitor, right, alcohol and drugs, abstain as best you can, and if you need help in doing that, it's okay to reach out for help to do that. It's better that you have more sources of control in your life than that you have less sources of control in your life. So it's really important to do that. So that second don't is really important, right? Don't abuse substances, alcohol, and drugs. Let's go to number three of the do's. Number three of the do's is do always practice radical acceptance. Now, radical acceptance comes from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and it is actually one of the foundational components of DBT, which is acceptance. Acceptance is exceptionally hard, right? Because think about it. Folks with BPD want what? Acceptance. Folks with BPD want what? To be understood, which is a component of acceptance. But what we need to do for individuals with BPD and with my clients, what we try to do is that we try to learn and embrace this sense of radical acceptance. Radical acceptance in a nutshell is that you may not like the situation you're in, but you kind of have to accept it because you're in it. And it doesn't mean that you just give into it. It doesn't mean that you just allow it. It's just that you accept that it's happening. Another component of radical acceptance is that we don't have time machines. Man, it'd be really cool if we did. But we don't. So we can't go back in time and redo our history. We have to accept our history as it is. And recognize also that it is up to us as to how we interpret it in the present and how it impacts us. That determines what we will do with it going forward. If you've had a particularly traumatic history, we can't go back and undo that. So we have to accept where we are at the present, recognize that it occurred, but what we do in the present impacts what will happen in the future. So we have to remember that. No time machines, so we have to accept that. The present is a situation we're in, which we can certainly influence, right? That's where we have the most power. That's where we have the most influence. And when we utilize adaptive, beneficial, positive strategies, we increase the probability of positive outcome down the road. When we use self-destructive, violent, hurtful strategies, maladaptive strategies, we increase the probability of negative outcomes. So we have to recognize that. It's that part of acceptance, accepting ourselves for who we are, the situation we're in, what we've experienced, and implement that today to impact how we live our life and to go forward, to make positive changes. We want to increase the positive probabilities. That want to increase the probability of positive outcome. So number 3 of the don'ts is don't accept the belief that you're less than. A lot of individuals, a lot of my clients, that they grew up in home environments or they grew up in different type of environments through different types of experiences, that they were told that they weren't good enough. They were told that they were broken. They were told that everything they do wasn't sufficient enough. They were told that they don't think correctly, act correctly, or function correctly as a human being. And what happens is this becomes internalized as this feeling of being less than. And what's the metric? A lot of times folks don't think about, okay, so what am I comparing myself to? Less than what? And that happens a lot with BPD, is that when we try to compare to others, we don't have a metric. We don't have that balance. So it's just this generalized sort of fear, concern, uncertainty about whatever we're comparing ourselves to. And if this is confusing, it kind of should be. Because if you don't know what you're comparing to, how do you know if you're more than, less than, or equal? You don't. So that's the problem with BPD. It confuses you to compare yourself to something that isn't there, that isn't well defined. It's ill-defined. We don't know what it is. So we want to, get away from that, right? So we don't want to accept the belief that we're less than. If we accept our past as it is, that it occurred, right? We accept that our certain current situations that we're in, right? That this is where we can enact the greatest influence. But believing that we're less than increases the probability of engaging in maladaptive behaviors that are so self-destructive, we get stuck and it starts to wear away at our life and how we live it and the relationships we have and the connections we have to others. And we may have all these memories of things that happened in the past. And you may have people in your life that are still present that really kind of activate this sense of being less than. And what you want to do is you want to push back on that idea. Push back on saying, I'm not less than, right? What are your talents? What are you good at? And if your immediate reaction is nothing, that's not true. Everyone is good at something. It may not be painting the Sistine Chapel, right? But it may be something. Maybe you're kind. Maybe you're patient, right? Maybe you love pets. Maybe, you want to help kids, whatever it is. But it's those things that define you, not this nebulous, cloudy idea of being less than that so many folks with BPD do hold on to. And it really encourages these maladaptive patterns. So number 3 is we don't want to accept the belief that you're less than. Number 4 of the do's. Number 4 of the do's is do find and support your sense of meaning and purpose. One of the most important things that I do with all of my clients, whether they're on the BPD spectrum or not, is that we try to find purpose and meaning in their life. What is your purpose and meaning? What drives you? So when I was 7 years old, I really loved watching other people, just loved it. And I was always fascinated by other people, by what they were doing and how they were interacting with different people, even the same person. I remember coming out of a movie and, I was sitting in my family and I don't remember what we were doing. We were just sitting there, and we're watching people come out of the movie. And I'm watching these different people. And it was interesting. I remember thinking, it's interesting how the same person interacts and reacts to others differently. So there's so much variability. But that gave me a lot of of meaning and purpose to try to understand this. What is this? What is going on? And is there a way to understand these folks and what they do? Lo and behold, psychology provided a nice framework to do that. Then that sort of drove me to identifying folks who really have trouble finding meaning and purpose. And that falls into the PD category. And folks with BPD, I think, have a particularly difficult time doing this, because that sense of meaning and purpose is clouded by feeling less than, by not accepting where they are, by utilizing alcohol and drugs, by not sleeping well, right? By not having a good routine, right? By not practicing pause, by having these reflexive maladaptive habits. See how it's all coming together? See, yeah, it's pretty good, right? But what is your meaning and purpose? It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be all-encompassing. But what is your meaning and purpose? Find that meaning and purpose, and you don't need outside validation for it. What is your meaning and purpose? And that's something personal to you, right? You don't have to ask mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, friend, husband, neighbor, whoever, to say, oh, you know what? What do you think about da-da-da? Who cares what they think about it? If this gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, then follow it. If it helps you grow, helps you develop, helps you believe in yourself, that's what we want to do. That's our meaning and purpose. And grab onto it and nurture it. You know, when I was 7 years old, I expressed what I'm expressing to you, right? I expressed it to my dad. And he was like, okay. So he took me to a bookstore and he said, okay, you know, pick out a book that you think kind of relates to that. So I picked out this book by Barbara Tannen. It's called Please Understand Me. And I remember, right, I gave it, you know, to my dad. I said, okay, this is a book I want. And he said to me, he said, I don't think you're going to understand this book. I don't think that this is a good book for you. And I said, yeah, well, I'm going to read it, right? I was just dead set on reading it, right? Because I found this meaning and purpose. This was so fascinating to me. I wanted to learn more about it. So I convinced him. He bought it for me. I didn't understand it at 7. But I read the book much, much later. And it really is a fascinating book. I think that it at what I needed at the time to provide this sense of meaning and purpose, to help me understand a little bit about why folks do the things they do, how and what motivates folks to do the things they do. But eventually, though, I did read it, and I did get a lot from it. And maybe someday I'll be a psychologist. Oh, I am. So that's our number 4 do's, right? Do find and support your sense of meaning and purpose. Number 4, don't give in to the negative belief that you deserve to feel pain to be okay. Self-punishment is a hoax. A lot of folks with BPD hold on to this belief that once I've suffered enough, then it's okay to feel good. It's this internalized idea, this false belief that if I make myself feel bad enough, I'll do good things. Human beings do not operate that way. You will not shame someone else enough to then be successful. We just don't work that way. Because what happens is, just as we talked about number 3, don't accept the belief that you're less than. What happens is, if you deride someone on a continual basis, if you continually point out what they're doing wrong, they get stuck in what they're doing wrong. They embrace what they're doing wrong, and they internalize it, and they begin to believe that they are wrong, that they are broken, that they are malfunctional, right, in some way. So don't hang on and give in to this negative belief that you deserve to feel pain to be okay. That's a hoax. That's completely not a reality. That is often a belief, a self-defining belief from a lot of my clients that are along the BPD spectrum. Is that, well, I did this and I need to be punished, so I punish myself until it's okay. No, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go through that. This goes back to the issue of radical self-acceptance. And radical acceptance says, okay, look, you made a mistake. You got to own it. Sometimes that hurts all its own, right? You made a mistake. You got to own it. But you own it. You accept that you did it, and you move on. That's it, right? If you feel like you have to engage in reparations, you don't have to make yourself feel horrible to repair that rupture. You don't need to do that, right? What you can do is you accept that it occurred. You may need to apologize. You may need to engage in reparations, but then you let it go, right? And then going forward, you make sure that you don't do it again, right? You apply adaptive, healthy strategies so that you don't do it again and you move forward. So that's our number 4 of don't, is don't give in to the negative belief that you deserve to feel pain to be okay. And remember, self-punishment is a hoax. There is no benefit that comes from it. And then number 5, our last do, is that do find kindness and compassion for yourself and live it. So many folks with BPD, with my clients, when we're working together, you know, I often see this outline and this frame and this silhouette, however you want to say it, right, of this kind, compassionate person, this often very creative, often very insightful, often very driven person that is mired by this false envelopment of negativity, this false sense and internalized belief that they are bad, that they are broken, that they are worthless, all of these things that actually turn out not to be true. And part of the work that I do with them is to clear out that confusion so they can see that kindness and compassion inside themselves, and then how can they express it as they're living their life? What is kind and compassionate about you? Your BPD, right? As soon as you hear that, your BPD is going to tell you nothing. That is absolutely not true, and that's your BPD talking, because your BPD is this little, manipulative thing inside you, right, that tells you all these negative things, tells you all these hurtful things that are 99.9% of the time exceptionally false because they're in the extreme, and our lives are not in the extreme, right? You're always, right, a loser. You're always mean. You're always worthless. Things like that. Right? You will always, those extreme identifiers, always, must, stuff like that. So it's these extreme terms that we know that's false because our lives we don't live them as the extreme, right? So find that sense of kindness and compassion and live it and express it. And as you do that, you'll find that you're more in touch with your authentic self. And there will be some pushback, right? Your BPD is like this stray cat. As you feed it, it kept coming around. And you made that stray cat really fat. It's a fat cat. So then when you stop feeding, it's going to push back, right? Because it's really hungry and it's like, gimme. But we're going to stop feeding it. And as you find that kindness and compassion in yourself, you'll find that it's better to live it, that you have more positive outcomes, that you have more healthy relationships. So it's finding that kindness and compassion in yourself and living it. And our last don't is don't believe your BPD lens. It's tricky and false. You want to live an authentic life. This means that you're actually living in shades of gray. The world is not black and white. The world is not a split. And your BPD lens wants you to oversimplify your world, because what happens is when you oversimplify it and you live at the extremes, it can then tell you these things that encourage maladaptive patterns, increase the probability of utilizing alcohol and drugs, that makes you feel less than, right? That encourages this negative belief that you deserve pain to be okay. So it's all of these things played together, and it's this BPD lens that distorts the reality of your life, not only how you see yourself, but how you see others. And you have to push back on this BPD lens and see the world in a more authentic fashion, and you can do it. You can do it by incorporating the 5 do's that we just talked about, being aware of the 5 don'ts that we just talked about, and living your life by the do's. Don't get caught up in the don'ts. I'll leave a list of the do's and the don'ts in the comments section or in the information section, right, for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and please let me know how it goes. Let me know which do's you live and which don'ts you live as well. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And please take care and live by your do's, not by your don'ts. I wish you all the best. Take care. Bye-bye.